Hi, I'm fitness and wellness expert Kimberly Lou, and today we're going to be going over a 7-step process to help you get through big emotions when you're wanting to quit your program. Now, oftentimes what happens is we set this really nice, beautiful goal, and then within about a week or two, we're back to our old behavior. Why? What happened? Usually we get triggered. And a lot of times when we get triggered, we'll reach for food. We'll reach for alcohol. We'll reach for some other things that maybe aren't too naughty for us to even mention here. But a lot of times what happens is because we're trying to quench that big emotion. So what we're going to do today is we're going to go through a simple 7-step process to move you through that big emotion, crisis, problem, over to the solution so that you can live your happy new life with ease and grace. Journaling is probably one of the most important parts of your program that's going to help you to success. For me, journaling helps me get those big emotions out of my body, out of my mind, and onto paper so I can let it go and move on. And in this 7-step process, we're going to move you through the problem all the way into the solution, and then again at the very end, helping you visualize what your new life looks like. Oftentimes what happens is we don't know what it's like to live in this new life, and it seems very uncomfortable because we don't know how to live there. And so we automatically go back to the old behavior. So what this 7-step process will do is it'll move you through the past, into the present, and into the future so that you know how to create the life that you've always loved. Let's get started. Okay, I've got my little notebook. I've got my trusty pen, and we're going to get started on working on big emotions or your problems or crises or whatever it is. So let's move through it. So step 1 is what happened. For example, I remember being at a party and I was in there and I felt really uncomfortable. None of the women were talking to me. I didn't know anybody and I felt really insecure. And I almost left. And I remember thinking to myself, well, in the past I would have just left. But I remember thinking, well, they don't know me. If they knew me, they would love me. And it ended up working out, but let me go through why it affected me so much. So step 1 was I wasn't accepted at this party. Nobody knew me. I felt insecure and I wanted to leave. That brings me to step 2. Well, if it's hysterical, it's historical. Oftentimes what happens is if I get triggered with something, then I immediately go back to the old behavior. I want to go drink, or I want to eat some food. I want something outside of me to fix this triggered feeling. It's very raw and it kind of stings a little bit. So it makes me want to reach out. And the reason is because it's a past memory that it's coming up. So for example, I remember when I was a kid, I was the last of 9 children. And my mom and dad, they weren't around. They were so exhausted by the time I was born that they had nothing left to give me. And a lot of times my brothers and sisters, they were older. And I was the youngest by 5 years and nobody wanted me around. So what it brought up is that I was unlovable and that no matter what I did, I wouldn't be accepted. So that brought up that for me. So I write that down. Step 2, I don't feel lovable. I feel like I'm unaccepted and that nobody's ever going to love me. Okay, now is this emotion real? No. And what we have to realize is that feelings are not facts. Most of the time they come up and they take us off, but really that's just an emotion. If we sit with it for a minute, it will disappear and we can actually disappear it out of our body. In another video, I'll show you that. But for now, then that would move me to step 3. So step 3 is, well, what does that affect? Well, it affects my personal relationships. So I would write this down, personal relationships. It affects my self-esteem. It affects my self-worth. It affects my finances, especially if I'm networking for a business event or whatever, then it would affect me financially because oftentimes people can feel my insecurity and wouldn't want to do business with me. So all the things that it affects my health because then my stomach would hurt, all these different things. Okay, then that would move me to step 4. And step 4 would be, well, what's my part in that? Well, my part is believing that that's actually true. You know, oftentimes what happens is I create these self-fulfilling prophecies that ring me as true. So, well, they didn't talk to me, therefore I'm not liked, and let me just get out of here so I don't have to move into this new life, because, which then now brings me to step 5. What's my payoff of being in this emotion? Step 5 would be, well, I'm right, and I don't want to give up being right. And, you know, here's the deal. You'd be surprised at what we do to keep living in that old life so we don't move on. There is a definite payoff in thinking negatively and martyrism and being kind of like a victim. So what we want to do is we want to address that, because that's kind of like our emotional hit. If we are wallowing in our crap, so to speak, it's kind of like a drug, and then we get that emotional hit, and then it's like, oh, okay, I'm high. That feels really good. And then all of a sudden now you have to create another big emotion so that you can get that hit again, and eventually you're right back in the past. So you want to identify the payoff, because there's always a payoff. You always have a part, step 4, and there's always a payoff to your part, which means oftentimes that you don't have to move into this new life. But and you don't want to make yourself wrong for that. Not even one little bit, because we all do it and we all have things that we're working on. So never make yourself wrong, but we quickly want to identify it so that we can move out of it and then into the solution, which would be step 6. Step 6 is, what is your solution? For me, when I was at that party, the solution was to stay. And whoever would talk to me, I would just talk to them. I would look at their necklace and I would say, oh my gosh, that's a beautiful necklace. Where did you get that? You know, in the past, I was very socially awkward. I stuttered. I was bullied as a kid. I didn't quite fit in. I was a tomboy with all the girls playing Barbies. I was climbing trees. Honestly, I really didn't fit in, and I didn't have the social skills to be able to talk in a way that I'm talking to you right now. It's taken a lot of work. But in that, what I started to learn was, okay, if I compliment something, which is a true and beautiful compliment, then they would start to come up with a solution, or they would start to come up with stories, and then I could ask them questions about that stories, and then once my guard was down, their guard was down, and then now we were having a free conversation. That's called living in the solution. And then after the solution, what we want to do is we want to move into, what would my life look like if I were constantly living in the solution of this out of this problem? For example, okay, what do I want my life to look like? Well, if I'm going to parties, I want it to look like I'm getting along with people, I'm connecting with people, I'm having a good time. They're interested in what I have to say. I'm interested in what they have to say. I'm hanging around interesting people and we really like each other. So step 7 would be, you write down what you want to have happened. Because what happens when you do that is you start getting out of the past and into the future, and you start living into your new future, and you can deal with all the anxiety of living in your new future or uncomfortableness of living in your new future while you're home alone with the writing. That way, when you go into that new experience, you feel comfortable, and it happens with ease and grace. Okay, so now we've just gone through that simple 7-step process that's moved you through a big emotion to get you on to the other side. Step 1, what happened? Write it down. Step 2, if it's hysterical, it's historical. So if it's historical, it's something from your past that's triggering you now, and you want to stuff it because it stings. But here, you don't want to stuff it. You want to move it on to step 3. Step 3 is, what does it affect? It affects your personal relationships. It affects your finances. It affects your health. It affects everything. And it's so important to know what it affects so that you know that it's time to move forward. Which brings us in now to step 4. What is your part? We always have a part in something. So when we can acknowledge our part, we can quickly move forward into step 5, which now is, okay, the payoff of our part. What's the hit that you're getting, that emotional hit of not changing or having that big emotion? And oftentimes it's so we don't have to move forward and deal with the pain that we deal with of living a new life. However, there's always a solution. That's step 6. We write down the solution of what we want to have happen. Boom. Okay, I want to feel, I got to stay at the party. I've got to talk to people. I've got to compliment them. I've got to blah, 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 blah. You're in the solution. And then we come into step 7, whereas now we're living the life we want. What kind of life do you want? Write it down. Live it. Write it verbatim. I am at this party. I am having a great time. I am interested in what people have to say. I am confident in who I am at this party and who I'm being. I love what I'm wearing, and as we do that, again, we deal with those big emotions, and it allows us to then go have that life that we've always dreamed of. I'm Kimberly Lou, and next week we're going to be talking about adrenal fatigue. I love you. Let's work this out.